We're at the end of the first week in April, and look, it's lovely and sunny, and more importantly, it's warm. Question is this going to last? But the bees are making the most of it, and for the second time this year, we've seen them out in force. So it's now April. Welcome to Self-Sufficient in Suburbia. This bed we haven't used before, and our plan was to plant this out with potatoes, and it would help break up the ground because previously it's had a lot of brambles growing on it, and occasionally we did pick the blackberries on it, but we did want to bring it into use. And plan number one, the potatoes, we've decided to switch to plan number two, which is to plant it out with soft fruit. And as I say, there's a reason for that, which is that this allotment is now going to be focused on growing soft fruit, and our smaller allotment, my dad's allotment, is where we're going to put the vegetables. So the potatoes we planted here are going to go up to the allotment in the next village, and in the meantime I've been planting gooseberries, red currants, black currants and some blueberries, and elsewhere on the allotment here I'm going to plant some more raspberries. These are some of our raspberry canes, and as you can see they have been pruned. Now, we've had these canes on the allotment for about 3 or 4 years, and they've done very well, very pleased with them, and as you can see they're only just starting to come into leaf. Now, they are behind schedule because of the cold weather that we've been getting. Now, here we have our herb garden. It doesn't look very much at the moment because none of the new herbs have started growing through, but just to pan around, here is the bed that I planted out over the weekend with soft fruit. Last month we hatched 8 chicks, and we put them into a brooder that we created from an old aquarium that we had, and unfortunately one of the chicks died 1 or 2 days after we first put them in. But since then they have grown very rapidly, and this is one of them here. Also, you can see that their wings have developed very, very quickly, and these little chicks here have almost learned to fly. And what we've had to do, because they've also grown so quickly, is to put them into a bigger brooder box that we've made from an old cupboard that we found on one of the neighbouring allotments. They were going to burn it, and we said to them, we'll have that, we know exactly what we can use that for. So we've created a bigger brooder box with the 7 chicks in it. So here they are in the cupboard that we converted into the brooder, so it's much bigger for them, and as you can see they have grown quite a bit, but they're also quite lively as well. But they eat lots and lots of chick feed, so we've got a couple of weeks to go before they finish on that and we start feeding them growers pellets. But as you can see they are much bigger. They've doubled in size. They're about 3 weeks old now, but they've doubled in size, and we think that we have 4 hens and 3 cockerels in that lot there. One of the things they tend to do is to come running to my hand, which clearly this time they have decided not to do. Once the camera is here. When we pruned the raspberry canes, I decided to have a go at planting some of the cut canes into this pot here, and there are buds on there, but at the moment there's not a great deal of activity, but they haven't died, which is the good news. But because of the cold weather, they're just not growing as quickly as we would have expected. These are some of the raspberry canes that we took as cuttings from the allotment and brought back here to the house, and they're actually here in the kitchen. They're not going to be here for much longer because we are going to try and get them into the greenhouse at some point, assuming things warm up a bit. But as you can see, the shoots on them are much bigger than the ones that we've got in that big pot on the allotment, and those ones on the allotment were actually potted up a week or so before these were, and as you can see, the the ones here in the warmth are doing much better than the ones out on the allotment, where a delayed end to the winter is keeping temperatures down, and that's going to have problems for us because it's delaying the date when we can get some of our crops into the ground. So effectively there'll be a shorter growing season, and one of the other problems is that it will keep a lot of the bees, it'll discourage the bees from coming out because it's just too cold for them. So here we have in the house a set of raspberry canes doing rather well, whereas on the allotment they're in a sort of state of suspended animation. This is the hawthorn hedge that divides my allotment from the next one, and as you can see there are very few leaves on it, a reasonable number of buds, but we are now into mid to late April, and really this should have been in leaf possibly a couple of weeks ago, and at the moment it isn't because of the late running winter. And what that means is that we've lost possibly 2, maybe 3 weeks of the growing season to that late winter, and you can see that in the hawthorn, which hasn't come into leaf yet. Now, if the summer runs or manages to stretch itself into autumn, then we might be able to recoup a little bit of the growing season, but not what we've lost in its entirety, which is a pity because that means that crop yields will be down. And just back to the hawthorn leaves are edible, and normally at this time of the year we would be starting to make wild leaf salads. Again, they're all late, and certainly no hawthorn leaves are available to pick to go into any salads. This is part of the drainage channel that I dug last month. It runs from one side of the allotment to the other. And this is the other end of the drainage channel, and as you can see we've been filling it with stones and bricks and rubble to allow the water to drain away. Well, when this channel is filled with stones, bricks and rubble, we'll then cap it over with some gravel, and then we'll put paving stones over them to create a path along its length. So that means that we've got the whole drainage channel running from one side of the allotment to the other. It'll drain some of the most the areas of the allotment that got most flooding last year, but what we'll also do is the neighbouring allotment will be able to link into it as well, so therefore his allotment will be drained without it slowly seeping through into the wet areas of our allotment. So both of us therefore benefit. It's now mid-April and we are here in the greenhouse. Bit cloudy day, but it's actually getting warmer, so fingers crossed that we've left behind the rather late winter that we've had. Now, these are some of the cuttings, the soft fruit cuttings that we made a few weeks ago, and which have been in our kitchen, and as you can see they are starting to come along reasonably well. Now, the kitchen's not an ideal place to be growing our soft fruit cuttings, so we've brought them here to the greenhouse to pot them up. And what we've done is just got a pot with some gravel in for drainage, a bit of potting compost, and then we're going to dip these in the rooting powder and into the bowl, into the pot there. Now I'm doing 4 per pot at the moment, but this one's actually going to get 5 because this is the last one I'm doing, and would you believe it, there's one more than I calculated for, so this pot has one more than it would have done. And we let these root, and then once they have successfully rooted and grown, we will then put them into the allotment. And the advantage for us is that this is saving us quite a bit of money, because we put some soft fruit that we bought into the allotment a week or so ago, and they were £3 a plant, and they looked very much like this, and this way of doing it has saved us an awful lot of money. And down here on the ground, on the floor of the greenhouse, we have all the others that I've put together, and each one of those would have cost £3, and £3 is the cheapest price that we would have got for them. So we have certainly, or hopefully, expanded our stock of soft fruit and not spent any money on doing so. This is the bottom of the drainage ditch that we've dug, and it takes us to the corner of the allotment, or very nearly to the corner of the allotment. That fence we have there is going to come down soon, because that used to be part of the chicken run. But if I take the camera back round here, you can see there is a thick layer of sandy gravel which we discovered pretty well near the surface of the ground. And bring it round here, you see it where I've dug some of it away, and then up the bank here is the manure heap. Now this area of the allotment has been used by us simply for storage or for putting the manure and letting it rot down over a year or so. So we've never actually dug here, but now that we have, we've discovered this gravel, which is absolutely ideal for us, because that means we can fill the drainage channel with the bricks that we found around the site and the stones and rubble, and then cover it over with this gravel, and that means we don't have to go out and buy any gravel, and that's going to save us an absolute fortune. A lot of you would have heard me moaning previously about the weather that we had last year. It was the wettest year on record in England, and it just rained and rained and rained, and that largely started back in April last year. Well, this year, this April, it has been very much the reverse of that. It's started off very cold, the winter just dragged on into early spring, but now we've had a couple of weeks of warm weather. You can hear the bird song over above the sound of the occasional car going past and the sound of the chickens, and spring is definitely here. So a couple of big differences that I've noticed here in the allotment with last year is that, first of all, the ground is very dry. We've had hardly any rain at all over the last few weeks, although tonight we're expected to have a bit of a downpour, and my goodness, the ground not off needs it. And secondly, the bees are out, and that comes as an enormous relief to us because we have invested a huge amount of time and an awful lot of money in our little bee venture, and last year we had no honey crop at all. It's vital that we get one this year, and we think that they're making a good start to the spring, even though the spring is a bit delayed, and indeed the blossom is a bit delayed as well. But it's a sign that things are looking up. Well, honey is important for us in a number of ways. First of all, it is going to be our substitute for sugar. So to become self-sufficient, we need to find an alternative to sugar, and honey is the obvious choice for that. But secondly, the honey, in terms of a self-sufficiency currency, has a very high value, so we can swap for all sorts of produce produced by other people. So in terms of our trading system, it's important. And thirdly, it's an important cash crop for us as well, because we can sell it, which will hopefully help us recoup our investment in the hives and the equipment, and give us a bit of an income as well. Since we put the drainage in on this side of the allotment, it's barely rained at all, which is quite a contrast with last year. I think back to April 2012, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained, and it rained in May, June, July, August. Well, you've got the picture. So we were hoping at some point that our new drainage system would be tested out by the weather, and indeed last night it did actually rain reasonably heavily for the first time in ages. Now that was good news for the plants as well, because the ground was getting a bit parched. I was bringing water over every day just to be able to supply the hens and the greenhouse. So last night the drains got used for the first time, and I'm pleased to say they actually worked. Well, this area here where we put the drainage in would have just turned to mud a few weeks ago had we had rain, and as you can see it's quite dry now. Now if we just swing over to the duck house there, you can see on the ground that's a part of the ground that we haven't yet put any drainage in, and there are little puddles there, not a great deal at the minute, but that would have turned definitely into a huge mud bath if we'd had some reasonably heavy rain, and it would have stayed like that for weeks. But our next job is to start digging the drainage from the duck house through to the pond. It's now the end of April, and it's rather sunny. I'm in t-shirt, it's rather warm. Basically, the late running winter is now over, so we're now into the growing season. It's 3 weeks late, but at least in May we'll be able to get out there and get lots of things planted. So join us next month to see how we get on. See you then.